One of the most important indicators of health as we age is the amount of muscle, right? The amount of muscle and strength we have. I remember there was a low-fat craze that came out in the 1980s. All you need is like the recommended daily allowance, basically just enough protein to survive.
I have a question for the non-medical providers to start. I'd really, since they're more in the day-to-day with just kind of have their clients coming to them with a different perspective. My question is, what is the biggest FDA perpetuated or medical school perpetuated myth that you debunk with your clients that is the one that drives you nuts? I think just with this population a little bit to those things that we're hearing, right? Testosterone's bad for you, take your birth control, things like that. What's the biggest myth that your clients are coming to you with that you wish you could debunk?
I think one of the biggest myths I deal with now, especially I live in Australia now, and they're probably 15 to 20 years behind America as far as having TRT clinics, have this be not taboo anymore, being able to go in and get TRT. Unless you look like you don't need it, because they think what you look like physically on the outside is what's indicative of whether you need testosterone or not. So I went into a doctor, GP, and I had a throat infection. So I went in for that, and he wanted me to run labs. And I said, don't worry about it. I'll do them privately because I'm going to order far more labs than you're willing to order me. He goes, oh, like what? And I said, well, I'd like to get my testosterone checked. He says, okay, do you have low testosterone? I said, yes, I've been on TRT since I was 36. I'm now, at the time I was 43 or 44. I think I'm supposed to be on TRT, but I can't get any here. So I just have to be a crying little bitch all the time that looks like Golem on Lord of the Rings. So, so I'm like, so I'd like to investigate that. And the guy looks at me and he goes, I don't think you need it. And I'm like, I have labs 3 months ago that say I'm hypogonadal. And he goes, nah, physically you don't need it. And I'm like, it's not about the muscles. Like, I'm smaller than I was when I was in high school. So it's more to do with the sleep and the libido and feeling good and antidepressant. I wanted all that. Had nothing to do with growing muscles. I don't have a problem with that. But that's what they visualize it, especially when a guy comes in with, sleeve tattoos and all that looks fairly fit and obviously handsome. But they look at that and they go, yeah, you obviously don't need it. So,
kind of way.
Yeah, yeah. So I should just starve myself for a few months and go in, right?
The biggest myth I would see is that testosterone makes you ragey, causes roid rage. I think we've all met or seen some roided up dickhead at a nightclub pick a fight with someone, punch someone in the back of the head. I used to be a DJ, I saw that a lot. That's not what testosterone does. Massive doses of anabolic steroids combined with being a dickhead in the first place, absolutely, for sure. And different ones will do that differently based on their different chemistry. But the thing with testosterone I've found is that if anything, it makes men less confrontational. That's a big one. And when we look at neurologically how androgens work, they absolutely are disinhibiting. So I find that testosterone is an amplifier. It makes men more of who they are. So if men are compassionate and empathetic and caring, when they have more energy, when they are less stressed biologically, because testosterone antagonizes a lot of effects of stress, they tend to be more of who they are, but they also tend to be more calm because their body, and as Luke talked about before, stress is this huge factor. And I like to look at stress very simply as not having enough X to do Y, whether don't have enough money to pay my bills, not smart enough to be on this panel, all of these different things. It's, not having enough of what you need to do what you need to do. So when a man is lower testosterone, he tends to be lower energy. He tends to feel a lot worse. And the idea that when we increase his testosterone, that's going to make him violent, aggressive, it's going to give him a bunch of problems. I have found that to actually be the opposite. And one thing that does come up with that, though, in terms of a counter argument is that I've had a couple of guys, come to me, particularly younger guys. They've never had high testosterone a day in their life. And it's a very different demographic working with men who've never properly androgenized versus men who are in their 40s, 50s, and they're returning back to how they felt at 21, 22, where you've got a guy at 25 and he's been like, well, I felt like shit my whole life. The difference is that he'll come back and say, oh, I can't control my temper anymore. I'm getting a bit of a temper. And it's not that he could control it in the first place. He didn't have a temper to begin with. So he's learning. A lot of these guys, when they're starting testosterone, when they're younger, when they haven't actually had that peak androgen level before, they might have to get to know themselves a little bit better in terms of now they've got a bit of this fire that they have to regulate. But it's definitely far from flying off the handle and becoming difficult to manage or violent or aggressive. And a lot of the time when men come to me and their wife has a concern about them going on testosterone, their girlfriend has a concern about them going on testosterone, it's that they're going to become some kind of toxic masculine dickhead where in reality it's going to actually make their man, more of who he is, and it's going to help him in that way. So that would be the biggest myth that I see.
Yeah, you stole mine, but that's okay. The testosterone, I would agree, tends to calm people down if you take the right dose. Now, Tren, that's a whole different story. So if you want to be ragey and see the cops a lot, take a lot of Tren.
So I just wrote I write a column for a bodybuilding magazine, Muscular Development Magazine. I just did a column called "Was Bro Science Right All Along?" And the idea of it was to sort of look at all these, medical tropes that the medical community, the scientific community has been putting out there for all these years, what they believe, and compare it to what the bros have believed for 40 years since I'm competing in bodybuilding. One was resistance training, right? I had an internist many years ago when I was competing in bodybuilding. I was a young kid. I went to him. I'm all jacked up, and he's like, you got to stop this. You got to stop lifting weights. I'm like, what do you mean? It's not good for you. It's bad orthopedically. It's bad for your heart. You really just all you need is cardio. All you need is cardio. Of course, we found out, and now the scientific literature shows one of the most important indicators of health as we age is the amount of muscle, right? The amount of muscle and strength we have. Second was protein. The AND, the Dietetics Association, still says all you need is like the recommended daily allowance, basically just enough protein to survive, as opposed to bodybuilders, the bros believed way back, a gram per pound of body weight. That's been the rule since I was 17 years old. And now what do we find when it comes to protein? The doctors who know what they're doing are like, yeah, protein should be the main staple of your diet. Fat. I remember there was a low-fat craze that came out in the 1980s. Suddenly, every product on the market had to be low-fat. What did they replace the fat with? Sugar. And so if you look at the craze of low-fat dieting and the rise in the epidemic of obesity in America, correlates almost directly, right? The bros knew better. The bros knew not to take all those carbs in. Fat was healthy, right? Fat, healthy diet, avocado, fish, all the things, even some saturated fat, maybe not in excess, but not to be staunchly afraid of it. And last but not least, okay, the bros knew about hormones long before the doctors figured it out. I mean, probably 40 years before, right? The bros were on testosterone in the 70s. And at that time, of course, the medical community had no idea. The medical community in the 1980s was putting out the idea that steroids don't work, that testosterone doesn't work, it doesn't build muscle, just complete fabrications thrown out there. You can rig a study, methodologically, you can rig a study to say whatever you want it to say. And so the bros knew. Now, do the bros, as Luke says, do the bros sometimes go a little too far with the Tren and the halitosis? Yeah, sure. Bros take everything way too far. So, okay, 200 milligrams a week of test is good. 2,000's better. 8,000 would be even better. So, I mean, we know that that's out there, and you have to rein it back and use common sense. But, when you really think about it, the bros were ahead on almost everything.
As far as the biggest myth that I'll package in the testosterone aspect as well, because it's kind of twofold. So one of the things that I have to encounter that, usually even anti-physician, but more so on the other side of the pond, no offense, but it comes to me as far as the physicians, the age-old, everything is treated via the medication rather than treating the diet. So meaning you may have an uncontrollable diabetic with uncontrollable blood sugar levels, and the solution is to treat them with more medication. Whereas the medication is only needed because the diet is out of control. If you reduce specifically the carbohydrates and or sometimes proteins in that diet, the need for the medication reduces. If you increase insulin sensitivity rather than crush insulin sensitivity by an influx or an overabundance of insulin, you get a far greater response. And that also correlates and translates to the myths and things that I'll encounter with different clients when they'll come to me as well on the testosterone side of things. More is not always better. Now, given the environment of where we are today, and I think we all know what the name of this event is, more is on display frequently, but that is also a purpose-driven more that is relative to what is on display. That does not mean that for the average individual lifting weights, for the average powerlifter, strongman, whatever professional athlete you may have, that more will produce the same results, or at least results that are relative to you and your pursuit. The guys always laugh because I'll always refer to it as there's show muscles and there's go muscles. And you have to approach whatever your goal is accordingly. That can relate to glycogen, hypercompensation, all kinds of things. If you're solely interested in the aesthetic, that is one thing. And what produces that aesthetic and that kind of overreaction, and which at the end of the day, what you see technically is extreme inflammation. Large muscles at the end of the day are extremely inflamed muscles through purpose, through target, and through that was the goal. Through the training that you utilize, that triggers a certain kind of inflammation. Through the diet, to trigger a certain kind of inflammation to also help promote that growth environment. Through that just complete oversaturation of nutrients being driven in. However, that applies to something very specific. You can have an individual who could be one of the strongest individuals in the world, and I can guarantee, because I would probably perhaps be the person who would know and be making those decisions, they're on less than the average 22-year-old who goes to the gym 4 times a week. And I can say that because I'm making that decision and I'm designing what protocols are utilized.
And I've been their doctor.
Mm-hmm. And Tom has absolutely been the doctor as well. And nobody will believe us.
Right.
Nobody. I mean, I say it, people ask me all the time, like, well, how much do you think that guy's on? He's on a ton, right? I mean, look at the size of him. How can you be 350, 400, 450 pounds? My God, they must be on so much stuff. Pulling airplanes, pulling buses, 1,000-pound deadlifts. I mean, I bet they can't breathe when they walk from their car to the shopping buggy at the grocery store. Well, you're not that familiar with the sport then, because my guys will throw the 1,000 pounds on their back and then they'll run down the street with it, because that's what that sport entails. And so you have to be very physically fit, you have to be very athletic, but you have to be muscularly strong, you have to have high cardio threshold, and you have to have a very tremendous endurance. But all those things are accomplished through manipulating the diet to maximize that stimulus. Any anabolic agent introduced is just that. It's a stimulus for whatever you want, for physical change, for athletic change. It's a stimulus, and it's intended to stimulate a response internally. That doesn't mean you drop a bomb on it and say, well, now something great's going to happen. No, that's called just being uneducated and not patient and not wanting to do the hard part, which is maximize the diet and get your insulin sensitivity and your response to insulin so that you're able to utilize that anabolic agent, if you will, or testosterone in a TRT, HRT situation, so that you're able to get the most out of it. They dramatically increase nitrogen retention in the body, meaning it can really make magical things happen with the protein that you intake. However, you have to get a sensitive body that will respond to those dietary influences like that. So the thing that's the biggest myth is that, oh, more is better, or to be the strongest or the biggest, you have to do the most. To be the fastest, you have to do the most. It's like, no, you have to do the horrible, boring, arduous day in and day out task of following a diet strictly, correctly, without cheating, and then let the stimuluses come in and produce their effect so that you are somebody who can be one of the strongest individuals in the world, taking 750 milligrams of test a week and 100 milligrams of Masteron every 3 days to mitigate DHT slightly, leaving estrogen levels alone unless there's some sort of issue going on in there, because estrogen is actually a very big strength driver in men. Now, if there's too much, oh yeah, that's a problem, just like anything else. But since it's also a big strength driver in men, and it's also extremely cardioprotective, a large, heavy weight training athlete having estrogen available in the system is actually a very good thing. So there's a whole lot of myths right there rolled into one.
That's awesome. It's really true. Worked on some of the same guys. I can't go into who, HIPAA, but just great. These guys have great genetics, though. So and another problem, I think, misconception is that if I take all these steroids, I'm going to look like Ronnie Coleman out there. Ronnie, love him. But it's just, so there's obviously a spectrum of genetics and responding genes. We could talk about that till the cows come home, right? I mean, some guys have great genetics naturally, and they don't respond as much as the other guys. So there's this whole spectrum on this stuff. But unfortunately, the young people and people are using steroids, and I just want them to be as healthy as possible. But I think this is really not the venue for that, right? This is more of TRT venue.
Okay, it all ties in. That kind of,
yeah.
So that it's actually really good because it ties in. I think we have time for one more of the topics. I don't think we have time for the peptides, but just quickly, we're talking about. I guess you mentioned a quite large dose because of these are athletes. Let's just talk about in general for TRT really quickly what you think the optimal dose is. I know Dr. Crisler used to say that dose makes the poison. This could apply to many things. So why don't we just quickly go around and discuss your thoughts on for TRT what the optimal dose might be. Who wants to start? I'll actually start on this side.
Oh, Dr. Lehman over here. I think, it just depends. It depends on working with your doctor to find that right dose. So when I was in America and I was on TRT, we started with 120 a week, and that didn't seem to be enough. And we worked our way up to about 160, 180 a week, and that seemed to be the sweet spot. Didn't need to take anything else. Just need to get my shit together with my lifestyle stuff because I had quite gnarly metabolic resistance. And again, you can't tell looking at somebody whether they have that or not. And I was teaching coaches like how to be fit, how to be healthy, how to win championships. And I looked the part, but my blood didn't look the part. And that's what freaked me out. I didn't realize, why am I not sleeping well? Why am I a bit sad? Like, what happened to my penis? It won't actually go all the way up. And I'm slapping it around and I'm trying to do anything I can to get them like, what is wrong with you? And so that's what actually took me to the doctor. It's like my dick didn't work. It's like, oh God. And so I went in and he's like, oh wow, look at your fasting blood sugar. Look at your A1C. Oh wow, look at your lipids. And I went, wow, that's a surprise. So, we went on like low dose TRT, and I spent the next 3 months getting my health stuff together, and I came back. It was a completely different change, and realized I didn't really need a whole lot of it, right? So I think I cruised basically on 160 milligrams a week, and that was plenty. That was plenty to put 2-3 kilos of lean mass on me and drop a lot of fat that I needed, stored energy that I needed to get rid of, yeah.
And did you do that once a week or twice a week? I mean, how did you
I've always done it twice a week. I feel better that way, like a Monday, Thursday, something like that. I've tried. A friend of mine tried to convince me, you just need to do it once a week. And I'd feel fantastic for the first 4 or 5 days, and then I'd have 2 days where I'm like, I can't wait for my shot. So I just decided, well, twice a week feels way better, and then there's a bit of overlap where you really feel amazing for like a day. You feel like Superman, but then you feel pretty on the level all the time.
So I wrote my first book, TRT 101, specifically on this kind of stuff to act as an instruction manual for guys to help dial in their TRT or when they're working with a practitioner to help get it right. So what I found on average with the guys who I'm working with, just to talk numbers, just to help people, is it would be a range between about, I think the lowest I've seen was about 10 milligrams a day, about 70 milligrams a week, and the highest I've seen was about 300, 350. But those guys were pulling the same numbers. These were people who were hyper responders or hypo responders, just like you can have one guy who has half a cup of coffee and it blows him through the roof, and someone else who has 8 cups of espresso and they barely feel it. So it takes different doses for different guys to get to the same number, and then different numbers will also produce a therapeutic response. But on average, with the clients who I work with, and I have to be careful with how I word this, I recommend generally as a ballpark about 150 a week to start, give or take, depending on things like age, SHBG, their baseline state of health. I think twice a week is a good place to start if we're talking cypionate and enanthate. I think that gives you that sweet spot of not having to inject yourself all the time. I also think that when you're starting TRT, learning how to use insulin syringes and stab yourself and all this kind of stuff can be a bit daunting. So I think twice a week is a good place to start. But if someone is, obese, if someone is compromised cardiovascularly, if someone has other health issues going on, it may be better to start with even 3 times a week to keep it smoother and have less peaks. I think that when it comes to what the optimal dosing protocol for something like cypionate and enanthate would be, it would be daily injections, but it's whether the juice is worth the squeeze from doubling the amount of injections from 3 times a week to daily. I think that the diminishing returns for effort and stabbing yourself kind of sets in at about 2 to 3 times per week, given the individual. And some guys, I find that a really good spot for injection frequency is when do you forget to do your shot? So if it's Monday, Thursday, and it comes around to like Friday morning, and you're like, oh shit, I forgot to do my shot on Thursday, that's a good spot for you. But if you're hanging out for that next shot, I think that's a good indicator that you're going, okay, maybe I could increase the frequency. I found that's been a good rule of thumb. And I found that in terms of the number that we need to take free testosterone to, it's somewhere between the top quartile of the reference range and maybe double the top of the reference range, depending on the guy. We can't test for androgen receptor sensitivity, and different ages will respond differently. So if you've got a guy who's healthy, fit, 21, doing everything right, and an 80-year-old, alcoholic who's obese, what is physiological for the young guy and what is physiological for the older guy are going to be two completely different things. So I think that there's a lot of factors that needed to be taken into account. When I worked out the average of all the guys who I work with, I think it was about 160 or 170 a week was the average number. I'm a bit of a low responder, so I use 250 a week, but that's what gets me the numbers of an average guy on about 200, 210. But yeah, it depends on a lot of factors, but I find that those numbers are good ballparks to work with. And I find that if we're tight, I like to start a bit lower and aim for the top of the reference range for starting TRT, giving their body time to adjust, and then titrating up gradually. So rather than making a big jump in, let's say, 50, 60, 70 milligram increments, bumping it up by 25 to 30 milligrams, giving it 8 to 12 weeks, up to 16 weeks, checking the blood, see how they feel, and then step it up again, because the body will need time to adjust, because there's a lot of processes that are impacted by androgens, and giving your body a big jump will be more likely to cause things like acne, water retention, and other side effects.
So I remember I had a patient who was former amateur world champion in bodybuilding. He was 6'2", 240. I was giving him 200 milligrams per week. I remember the trough levels were just below 1,000, so about 900. While I'm using half cc per week, and my trough level of total testosterone is about the same level. So it has to do, I think, with the BMI, also the metabolism. But what's more indicative factor is the free testosterone, the SHBG. So if you have, let's say, 1,000 nanograms of testosterone by an elevated SHBG of 100, you don't feel well because the free testosterone that works, the bioavailability is suppressed. So we can elevate the free testosterone and suppress the SHBG with a larger weekly dose. On the other hand, if you do microdosing, you break down, you have more stable levels, but you elevate the SHBG in this way, you lesser spike the free testosterone, you lesser spike also the estrogens or the erythrocytosis. So there are pros and cons. I've tried all protocols. I've tried the creams, I've tried the inhibitor, I've tried the enanthate, the propionate, I've tried the daily shots, the weekly shots. I was forgetting either I did it yesterday or I have to do it the day after. I think a very steady protocol is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Monday and Thursday. Personally, I prefer to inject now every week, once a week, every Monday, because I do also other shots of glutathione that I prefer to do.
But anyway, perhaps I'm going back to more frequent injections to
minimize my erythrocytosis, because a larger dose may give you a superb feeling 2 days after, but 2 days before the injection, let's say you inject on Monday, you're going to feel great on Tuesday and Wednesday, but during the weekend, you're going to feel this crash. So perhaps I'll go back to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in order to minimize my kick in EPO, in erythrocytosis, because frankly, I have to, I live in the border between hemoglobin 18 and 20. I use aspirin all year round, and also other medication like pentoxifylline or ARB, telmisartan, that's supposed to improve the blood flow and minimize the EPO. But every 8 weeks, I have to be in the hematology department and blood donate, actually phlebotomized. Even though I'm rhesus negative and I'm a global donor of blood, I cannot transmit my blood to other people because it's of higher viscosity. That's what the literature says. So I think it's personalized dose, but I frankly believe that every guy at 150 milligrams hits the upper range of the 1,000 nanograms.
So yeah, I know it's what we do at the clinic for some of our patients is a very bespoke dose. Everyone's dose is a bit different. We've had patients come to us from other clinics who were doing the 10 milligrams a day of subcutaneous testosterone cypionate and had sky high, could not get under control. And again, this is highly individual. That doesn't apply across the board. Couldn't get the hematocrit and hemoglobin under control. And some of the studies out there, I think one of the things you guys might know, they talk about the trough level of free testosterone as a predictor of your hematocrit and hemoglobin rising. So one of our doctors put a few of our patients now on testosterone propionate. And I know that seems almost counterintuitive counterintuitive because one would assume that the spike of testosterone is going to jack up the hematocrit and hemoglobin. What we found in a small subset of patients is that we've actually, because it rises, it falls, it gives a little bit of time before the next injection, that we've seen a fall in the hematocrit and hemoglobin for several patients have tried this protocol, about 25 milligrams of testosterone propionate every other day. Now, that's because we can get them, and they're available in the UK. They're not available everywhere commercially, but again, it depends on the patient. And I threw the dose question out because we've always said there isn't a gold standard protocol for dosing. It's what dosing is going to work best for that individual patient. So I'll leave it to you.
I don't really have much more to add. We're kind of... Yeah, that's what I was going to actually talk about, is just speak about. So one of the things women, if you're on birth control pills, remember birth control pills markedly elevate sex hormone binding globulin. So if you're on birth control pills, your testosterone levels are likely quite low because you've just bound out all of your testosterone. That's one of the downsides. SHBGs in women on birth control pills are sky high, and they will stay sky high sometimes years after you stop them. You know, birth control pills, I know it's convenient, but my belief is nobody should be on them. There's other things you should use because they're just too hormonally disruptive. So that's the main point I want to make, is that in women particularly, or as you're getting perimenopausal as a woman and you have sky-high estrogen levels, low progesterone levels, you'll see the same thing in perimenopausal women where they have very, very high sex hormone binding globulins, and they may need a lot more testosterone, and you have to try and control their estrogens using things that will help them, like diindolylmethane or calcium D-glucarate, things to help them get rid of the excess estrogens, or the testosterone's not going to work. You've got to follow that SHBG, the sex hormone binding globulin, and women that's really a problem.
Yeah, I like with that. Again, there's no optimal for everyone. There's an optimal for that person. Everyone's different. And yeah, I agree. I think most men, or I found a lot of guys, you know, like everyone else here, you know, typically anywhere from once to twice to 3 times a week. A lot of guys that will actually have done very well with a bioidentical compounded cream, which is applied daily in terms of matching the physiology. I mean, our bodies are meant to be in a rhythm every day, every week. And if you really want it to be truly physiological, that's the best way. You could titrate exactly where you want it to be every single day. You don't get the peaks and the valleys. So a lot of men do really well with that, and they much more improvement in their lipids, less erythrocytosis, if that's even a concern, and they do really well. The biggest issue is just the application. Busy guys are like, I'm going to forget, you know. A lot of guys do it, a lot of guys don't. So, and oftentimes, things change. You know, it has to do with all your levels, your SHBG, your cortisol, your metabolism, and as Luke said, you know, things change over time. If you get more metabolically healthy, you lose a bunch of weight, you have to be willing to change. Always be. It's not you're never going to be on the same thing, just like you're never on the same diet. You're going to be rotating strategies. You have to maybe go down on the dose, and a lot of guys do better on a lower dose than a higher dose. Instead of this typical, be on the bro dose. It doesn't always work. I've seen a lot of complications and issues with that. With women, same thing as Betsy said. I think women do very well with it, and a lot of women do really well with injections, even as frequently as once a week. Some do twice. And again, the cream, a lot of women prefer the cream, and it can be applied topically, and it can be applied vaginally. It works fantastic intraapplied vaginally. Does a lot of beneficial things for the not only for the body, but for the vaginal mucosa, and so much more. So a lot of my women do really, really well with that. A lot of my colleagues do that as well. So again, it all comes down to patient preference. You have to have a talk with them about their metabolism, their lifestyle. Do you like it? Do you like needles? Do you hate needles? Will you remember to do it every day, or you're not going to remember to do it every day? You know, sometimes it's just as simple as that. They all work if they're used properly, but what are they going to do? It's kind of like a diet. This may be the best diet for them, but are they going to do it? You know. So.
Right. Just to add to that, there are men that I take care of that just do it every Sunday morning because I can't remember. But starting off, a lot of the newbie guys start off and they do the real microdosing, which is like, you know, that tiny dose insulin syringe, which is difficult to do, but you can really do it. Just takes a lot of work, and every day or every other day. And that's actually going to be the best absolute way, because you're giving these teeny bolus doses, and it just really doesn't, you know, for estrogen, erythrocytosis, and just hopefully the feel. But what happens in the end is they can't keep it up. And I'm not talking the down below, sir. They can't. They just like, Doc, I can't do this. So invariably, it seems like after a couple of weeks or months, they're going to come to my nurse and be like, do I have to do it? So I like 0.5 Q5 with cypionate and enanthate. It just, you know, I have to keep a calendar to look at it, because even after 30-something years, I just forget it. I go, well, where am I at right now? But some guys take it once a week. So that's, you know, there is testosterone undecanate pills. There's a long injection undecanate, which Nebido, I think it's Aved in Europe, Aved here. Those, I don't like the long trajectory stuff. So I think testosterone injections are king. They're, even for women, just teeny doses, because you get that free testosterone in your brain and you just feel great. Right, in the cream, yeah. So I don't take care of women, so I'm kind of out of the loop on that. But as far as men, it's just like you're probably going to go on small injections, and it's like, if you're my patient, it's half a milliliter of testosterone cypionate from CVS or from a good compounding place, and you just take it every 5 days. And then you wait to get to about 6 weeks, or for the beginning 2 months, and you get nadir. You go to the lab at the nadir. It's called nadir dosing. And it's really interesting if you talk to traditional endocrinologists and urologists, they do that in nadir dosing because they don't want to see testosterone after the injection a day. They don't, because if it says 1200, no, they're gonna, it's spiking. No. Say a doctor gives the usual 1 milliliter every 2 weeks. So many guys have. Right. That's what that. So a lot of doctors, we're not going to hate on them because they just don't know this. Look at us. We're sitting here. We can fight each other and all this stuff, and because it's our day job. So if you go to some doctor down the road and they give you 1 cc of Cypionate every 2 weeks, and you go after about a month or 2 months, you go to the lab right after the injection, it's going to say 2,000. But if you wait 2 weeks, it could say 200. You know, so it's like, and then how many patients have come to me, the doc, I came with low T to the doctor and he actually lowered it more. You know, it's because they're shutting down your endogenous, and then they're measuring it 2 or 3 weeks later. So it's a moving target. It's a moving target. But the dose is going to be the lowest effective dose. Usually it is like 100 to like, again, I like Cypionate every 5 days. It could be twice a week is awesome. It's 3-4, 3-4, 3-4. I have some guys that even break it down. They split that dose and they do it really every 3.5 days. They take one dose and then in the morning, the next time they'll take it at night. These are, you know, kind of OCD-ish guys. And they just do it. And they do it for the estrogen, for their sex, for their feeling, for their brain, the anxiety. A lot of guys can't take testosterone because of the anxiety, panic attacks. And it's usually underlying, like the roid rage stuff. You're an asshole on steroids. I mean, it amplifies someone. And trend is always trend, right? Everyone's going to agree, yeah, testosterone and steroids, roid rage, no data, except trend. If you're on trend, you can be the nicest guy in the world, but you're gonna be a dick. So, I mean, it just dose has got to be figured out person per person. But some people like the cream, and I think testosterone, there's, what's the nasal? Natesto. They're even saying now, some of the experts are saying, the endocrinology guys say you could maintain fertility and not be suppressed with the gonadotropins, and I just don't believe it's true. I don't.
You can say that about Proviron as well.
Proviron's very interesting, though. Proviron I've had, because I'm in the bro science world, right? So Proviron can work. It's freakish how that, right. So, but again, this is extreme kind of adding on ancillary drugs, which is, we like this world, and Dr. T. All
right, so I think that wraps it up. If you have any questions, just want to let everyone in the audience know that this will be on the Balance My Hormones YouTube channel. If you want to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification, you will get a reminder when the latest video for this comes out, and other videos as well. But this way you won't miss it. We did do a bit of live streaming, but it looks like the live streaming didn't last the whole time. So we'll have the full, and we'll probably break the video up into several segments because we were here quite a long time. So we want to thank everyone on the panel and everyone in the audience for coming and watching. And so thank you for staying with us, and thanks for being here.